But of this group, the folks who do best by far are the vegans, and so the closer we get to that, the better off we are. However, I have discovered that there are some parts of the United States where this message it just doesn't go over too big. I was giving a talk in Lubbock, Texas a few years ago, and I was invited to Texas Tech University to talk about some of the new research that had been coming out, and I noticed that anytime I talked about vegetarian diets, the audience started grumbling a little bit, and they were sort of elbowing each other, and what's all this about? And as the din got louder and louder, it suddenly hit me that here in Lubbock, Texas Tech University is an agricultural school where they have classes like Swinology 101, and they have people go there to learn how to become livestock ranchers. But I realized, my grandfather was a cattle rancher. And my uncles and my cousins are all still in that same business. If you go through the Midwest, you see Barnard stock farms. And they're decent folks, and they're at risk for heart attacks and cancer and diabetes and weight problems, just like everybody else. So I wanted to make sure that this audience heard the message. But the longer I went on, the louder they got, heckling and booing, and it got to the point you just couldn't hear my lecture anymore. So I finally just had to say, look, you guys, you can heckle me as much as you want to. But this process of atherosclerosis, this hardening of the arteries that comes from a lifetime of eating beef and other high-fat foods, it doesn't just cause heart attacks. It can also make you impotent. And I have to tell you, I had their complete attention for the rest of my lecture. Now, I was not making this up. If you block... You know how when you eat a diet high in saturated fat and cholesterol, you get artery blockages forming, and they form in the coronary arteries to the heart muscle, and you end up with a heart attack. They can form in the carotid arteries to the brain, and you have a stroke. They can form in the arteries to the legs, giving you a condition called claudication or leg pains. But they can also... The male sexual anatomy is dependent on vigorous blood flow. It's a peculiar hydraulic system that was obviously devised on a Monday. And if you don't get good blood supply, it just doesn't function anymore. And cardiologists learned a long time ago that a man who comes in his mid-50s complaining about his nature not being what it used to be, they take that seriously because that man with impotence in midlife has a 1 in 4 risk of heart attack or stroke within 2 years. It's just a sign that he has artery blockages. That's not going to kill him, but the heart attack will, or the stroke will. So at the end of my lecture in Lubbock, I had all these guys in 10-gallon hats and snakeskin boots coming up for my macho tofu recipes and power brown rice. And I suddenly discovered, why am I talking about prostate cancer? These men don't have prostates, or they don't know they have them, and they probably may not be able to spell it or whatever, but they'll learn all that later. For now, there are certain other things that they care about, and that's what we should really be focusing on for young folks. What was I talking about? Okay, anyway, it's a good idea. Oh, here's the most important thing. A lot of folks say, I don't eat any red meat at all. You've heard this. I don't eat red meat, but I eat chicken. Let me give you the numbers. The leanest beef is 29% fat as a percentage of calories. The leanest chicken, about 23%. Fish vary. Some are lower, some are higher. But look at broccoli, look at beans and rice. Those are the low-fat foods, really low, and they have 0 cholesterol. So if you have a loved one and you want to help them to live longer, or if you yourself want to reverse your heart disease, and you just go from beef to chicken, have you done anything at all? Really not. And the studies show you don't reverse heart disease. You don't really lose a substantial amount of weight until you get down to those power foods, and that's the bottom of this slide. Now, breaking free. Start with I'm just going to walk you really quickly through what do we do about all of this. And then if any of you have some questions, I'd be glad to take them. And we have copies of Breaking the Food Seduction for you in the back also. But to break free, start with a healthy breakfast. Now, when I was a kid growing up in Fargo, my mom had 5 kids. And we'd come down to the smell of bacon. She would have the bacon strips in a big frying pan, and she would serve that with eggs. And we had some clues that that might not have been the very healthiest breakfast, because when the bacon was really hot, she'd take it out with a fork and put it on a paper towel to drain. And the hot grease that was left in the frying pan, she would very carefully pour that into a jar and save it Now, she didn't put it in the refrigerator. She just put it on the shelf because she knew that as that bacon grease turned cool, what happens to it? It hardens up, it solidifies, and that is a sign that it's loaded with the saturated fat that drives up your cholesterol, blocks your arteries, and ultimately kills you. And there's a fair amount of it in beef. Chicken fat is 30% saturated fat. You know, Americans eat 1 million chickens per hour. Thinking this is health food. We have 4,000 heart attacks a day. We are in the worst shape we have ever been as a country. So start with a healthy breakfast. Also does not mean just a bagel. A high fiber breakfast, like some old-fashioned oatmeal, not instant oatmeal. You have the old-fashioned kind that has all that fiber in it. And by the way, I'm a doctor, I'm not a chef, but I do know one tip. And that is when you buy old-fashioned oatmeal, ignore the package instructions. They tell you to take, say, 2 cups of water and heat it to boiling and then sprinkle in the oatmeal. And if you do that, it comes out like little rocks. Instead, start with all the ingredients cold. 1 part oatmeal, 2 parts water. It's all cold in your saucepan. Gradually heat it up, stirring while you do. And then when it explodes, of course, you have to wipe it off your countertop, which I don't know why that happens to be every morning. But anyway, it comes out very nice and creamy. That's the way to make it. Start with it cold, heat it up gradually, stir it up, and you'll have a great breakfast. You don't have to put anything on it. A little cinnamon and raisins or some strawberries if you want to. Have a half a cantaloupe. If you have toast, you might find that you really like rye bread or pumpernickel bread. They're richer and they cause a much more even blood sugar later in the day. Use certain foods to keep your blood sugar steady. Beans, whole grains, green leafy vegetables are good. I have lots more details on this I can share with you if you like. Leptin. Have you heard of leptin? L-E-P-T-I-N. Leptin is your appetite shutoff switch. Leptin is leptin is a hormone. It's in your blood. It turns down your appetite. And many people have no leptin or very little leptin in their blood. Why? Because they've been dieting. If you're dieting, your body thinks you're starving, and it stops making leptin because it doesn't want to shut off your appetite. It wants you to go back to eating again. Are you with me? It's understandable? Okay. So here's what happens. I was really good yesterday. I only ate 500 calories all day. The problem is today, I reacted by binging. Somehow the donut tray looked so much more attractive to me today. It's because I was starving. My body stopped making leptin, and we binged today. So don't do that. I have a rule of 10. The rule of 10 says this. If you are, and you don't need to calorie count. I encourage people not to. But if you are calorie counting, take your ideal body weight, multiply by 10. Whatever number that gives you is your calorie minimum. So let's say I should weigh 150 pounds. I multiply by 10, what do I get? I get 1,500 calories. Now, I should be eating much more than that, especially if I'm physically active, but I must never eat less than that. So I'm a bigger guy. Let's say I should weigh 200 pounds. I need how many calories a day? At least 2,000, probably much more, but this number isn't your recommendation. This is your minimum. Always go above that. If you ever go below, you don't have enough leptin in your blood to keep your appetite under control. Break craving cycles. If your refrigerator becomes magnetic every night at 8 o'clock, don't be home. Or make sure it's empty. Don't depend on willpower. You have to break free from the cycle. Be somewhere else. Arrange to go to the movies. And by the way, have your friends guide you away from the snack bars. If it's a monthly cycle, a low-fat vegan diet actually reduces premenstrual cravings. That is, if it's totally vegan, if it is very low in fat. We published a paper on manipulating estrogen levels in women who had severe menstrual pain. We published this 3 years ago in Obstetrics and Gynecology. If any of you would like more details on that, I'd be glad to show you. But we did it to curb menstrual cramps, and it is surprising how well it works when you do it right. But it also diminishes PMS and cravings. Regular exercise and rest is so important.